There are moments in the history of societies when a single event, born of human cruelty and obsession, leaves a wound that lingers far beyond the immediate aftermath. Such tragedies are not only about the act itself, but also about the deeper truths they reveal regarding the fragility of domestic life, the dangers of unchecked human impulses, and the enduring resilience of those left behind. The case I am about to recount stands as one of the most unsettling crimes in recent European memory, not simply because of its brutality, but because of the stark reminder it offers of how swiftly lives can be shattered by a single person's descent into obsession and vengeance. On a cold March evening in a small Swedish town, a young mother was tending to her children in the comfort of her own home. What should have been an ordinary night filled with the routine warmth of family life turned within minutes into one of the darkest nightmares imaginable. The mother was preparing dinner, waiting for her partner to return home, while her children, both still toddlers, played nearby. She exchanged cheerful messages with her sister, discussing nothing more ominous than upcoming family celebrations. Yet, at precisely 7 minutes past 7 in the evening, her correspondence abruptly ceased. The silence that followed marked the beginning of a tragedy that would resonate across the entire nation. When her partner returned from work that evening, he was confronted with a scene that no person should ever have to endure. The front door, strangely unlocked in a household where that was unusual, stood ajar. Inside, the home bore the unmistakable marks of devastation. It was not the chaos of children at play, but a scene that revealed deliberate destruction, the signature of an attack carried out with hatred. In the center of this chaos lay the young mother, badly injured, her life hanging by a thread. With horror still coursing through him, he rushed upstairs in search of the children, only to discover the unthinkable. Both had been brutally assaulted, their small, innocent lives nearly extinguished by an act of violence that defies comprehension. Emergency services were summoned at once. Against all odds, all 3 victims were alive when paramedics arrived, though barely so. They were rushed to intensive care, where doctors fought valiantly to preserve life. For the children, however, the battle was already lost. Within hours, they succumbed to injuries so grave that even modern medicine could not reverse them. The mother, against expectations, survived, though her journey back to consciousness was long and uncertain. For investigators, the crime scene was as perplexing as it was horrific. Nothing had been stolen, not a single valuable item disturbed. There was no sign of forced entry, no trace of an opportunistic burglary gone wrong. Instead, the violence was clearly targeted, intentional, personal. Whoever had struck that household did so not for material gain, but for reasons deeply rooted in malice. This realization immediately narrowed the field of possible suspects. The perpetrator had to be someone close, someone familiar with the family's routine, someone whose motives were entwined with the private lives of the victims. The initial focus of suspicion fell naturally on those closest to the family. The who had discovered the crime was scrutinized in detail. After all, many such tragedies throughout history have found their explanation in the hands of an intimate partner. Yet his alibi was unassailable. Colleagues confirmed he had worked his shift in full. Cameras along the route home confirmed his presence far from the scene during the critical minutes. Within days, he was cleared of suspicion. Attention then shifted to the woman's former husband. Their separation had been turbulent, marred by disputes over custody and lingering tensions. Moreover, she had previously filed a complaint of assault against him. Surely, investigators thought, such bitterness might fester into violence. Yet he too was quickly absolved. He had been in another city at the time of the attack, his whereabouts confirmed by reliable witnesses. With the immediate circle of suspects exhausted, the investigation stalled. Fear spread across the town. Here was a crime of extraordinary brutality committed in the heart of a quiet community, with no clear perpetrator. Parents grew fearful of leaving their children unattended. Neighbors looked upon one another with suspicion, and the once tranquil rhythms of a small town gave way to collective anxiety. The The breakthrough came from two sources: a witness and, eventually, the sole surviving victim herself. A passerby reported having seen a hooded figure dressed entirely in black loitering near the house around the time of the attack. The witness was convinced the figure was a woman. Minutes later, he saw the same person fleeing the scene and entering a car that sped away. Though unable to discern facial features or the vehicle's details, his testimony gave investigators a new direction. For the first time, they considered seriously the possibility that the attacker was female, an angle that had not dominated their early theories. 10 days after the attack, doctors reduced the sedatives, keeping the mother in an induced coma. Her survival had been uncertain, her prognosis grim, yet she awakened, fragile, her memory fractured, her body broken. For several days she could not speak, responding only with her eyes, but eventually she began to recall fragments of that night. She remembered a knock at the door, a woman introducing herself only briefly before striking her with a hammer. The memory was brief, but it was enough to direct suspicion toward a specific individual. When investigators presented her with a series of photographs, she pointed immediately to one. The woman in the image was not a stranger. She was a German national, once briefly involved in a relationship with her years earlier. This relationship, though short-lived, had left behind a storm of obsession, jealousy, and unrequited desire. That woman, having been rejected, had allowed her feelings to metastasize into hatred. The portrait of the perpetrator that emerged during the investigation was chilling. Raised in Germany, her childhood had been marred by the abandonment of her father, an event that experts would later suggest contributed to deep insecurities and a pathological fear of rejection. As an adult, she was restless, moving from country to country, job to job, never staying still, but always seeking affirmation in intense and often unstable relationships. When she encountered the man who would later become engaged to the victim, the attraction was immediate, but so too was the volatility. What began as a short romance during his travels quickly turned into something darker. Unwilling to accept the natural end of their brief connection, she inserted herself into his life, uninvited, appearing at his home without warning, fabricating stories of pregnancies and adoptions, and even attempting to take her own life in a desperate bid to regain his attention. When he firmly ended the relationship, she refused to let go. Over time, her obsession shifted from longing to vengeance. If she could not have him, then she would ensure no one else would either. The evidence uncovered by investigators painted a picture of premeditation rather than impulse. In an apartment she had rented in Sweden, authorities discovered photographs of the victim and her children, detailed sketches of their home's floor plan, and a diary filled with venomous entries cataloging daily routines, schedules, and grievances. On her laptop, search histories revealed inquiries into methods of concealing crime and erasing evidence. Even a footprint found at the crime scene matched shoes found in her apartment. Witness testimony confirmed that a hammer belonging to her flatmate had mysteriously disappeared around the time of the attack. Train station surveillance cameras recorded her arriving in and departing from the town on the day of the crime. When she was finally brought to trial, her demeanor shocked observers even further. Rather than express contrition, she appeared indifferent, even mocking. At times, she laughed openly, even when shown photographs of the crime scene, as though the suffering of others amused her. Such behavior prompted questions about her mental state. A psychiatric evaluation was ordered, but the results confirmed what many feared most. She was entirely sane, fully aware of her actions, and fully responsible for them. Her defense sought to cast doubt by pointing to the absence of DNA evidence, the missing murder weapon, and the lack of blood traces on her clothing. Yet the totality of circumstantial evidence, combined with the survivor's testimony, left the jury in little doubt. More than 40 witnesses took the stand, and piece by piece the prosecution constructed a narrative of obsession turned to vengeance, rejection transformed into calculated murder. In the end, she was convicted on all counts and sentenced to life imprisonment. For the victim, survival was both a miracle and a lifelong burden. She endured physical recovery, relearning speech and mobility, while grappling with the immeasurable grief of losing both children. Her life thereafter was a testament to resilience. Supported by her partner, she slowly began to rebuild, eventually marrying and having more children, though the shadow of that night would never fully leave her. The children she lost would forever remain a presence in the family's story, remembered and honored, their absence a reminder of what hatred had stolen. The broader implications of this case extend beyond the personal tragedy. It underscores the dangers of untreated psychological instability. When combined with obsession and rejection, it highlights the need for vigilance when patterns of stalking and harassment emerge. For what may seem at first like persistent infatuation can escalate into something far more dangerous. It also reveals the resilience of communities in the face of senseless violence. The town where this crime occurred was transformed by fear in the immediate aftermath. Parents kept their children indoors, neighbors double-locked their doors, and suspicion hung over daily life. Yet with time, through justice, healing, and the support of one another, the community found a way to move forward, scarred but not broken. There are two lessons for systems of justice and law enforcement. At first, investigators found themselves circling around male suspects, reflecting a common bias rooted in statistical likelihoods. The thought that a woman might have committed such a brutal act was not immediately prioritized, and in this oversight, valuable time was lost. It was only through witness testimony and, ultimately, the words of the survivor that attention shifted in the right direction. This should remind us of the importance of open-mindedness in criminal investigations, of resisting assumptions that narrow the field too soon. Violence, as this case tragically proved, is not bound by gender, nor is obsession the domain of one sex alone. Moreover, the case illustrates the catastrophic consequences of ignoring red flags in relationships. Here was a woman who had intruded uninvited into the life of her former partner, fabricated elaborate lies to regain attention, and attempted suicide as a form of manipulation. These were signs of profound instability and dangerous patterns. Too often, such behavior is dismissed as eccentricity or harmless drama. Yet, when left unaddressed, when not met with firm boundaries and perhaps intervention, such patterns can escalate, as they did here, into devastation. We must also reflect on the profound courage of the survivor, to awaken from a coma, to remember in fragments the worst moments imaginable, to face in court the very person who destroyed her family, and to point without hesitation to the perpetrator. This is an act of bravery beyond ordinary measure. Her testimony was decisive, not only in securing justice, but in ensuring that such violence did not claim further victims. That she has since managed to rebuild a semblance of family life is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable loss. At its core, this tragedy is a story of love and obsession, of rejection and vengeance, of innocence destroyed and resilience reclaimed. It reminds us that the greatest threats are often not from strangers lurking in the dark, but from those who once shared our lives, who once professed affection, but who, when consumed by obsession, transform affection into a weapon. It reminds us, too, of the responsibility we all carry to recognize warning signs, to take seriously the patterns of stalking and manipulation, to protect those who may be vulnerable to such dangers. And so, as we reflect on this case, let us not view it solely as a horrific anomaly from a distant town in another country. Let us instead take from it lessons of vigilance, compassion, and resilience. Let us recognize that every community is vulnerable to the destructive potential of obsession left unchecked, but also that every community has within it the strength to heal, to rebuild, and to move forward. The story is tragic beyond words. Yet it is also a reminder that even in the darkest moments, justice can prevail, truth can emerge, and survivors can find a way to live again. It is in their resilience and in the determination of communities never to forget that hope endures.